Hello, welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical. This is the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I go over the week's reporting on the Church of Scientology and things related to that, according to Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Chris, great to be here.
Yeah, we had some interesting stuff happening. Let's start off with this sort of ongoing sort of story with Emily Armstrong, this lead singer for Linkin Park, who is a Scientologist. There were some reveals this week from some insiders about her and her mother that were quite interesting. What do we got on this?
Right. So we started talking about this last week. I think that, Linkin Park has sort of faced a backlash by after coming back after 7 years after Chester Bennington's death. They've hired Emily Armstrong as their singer, and she grew up in Scientology, and she showed up one day at Danny Masterson's arraignment in support of him. So that's caused a backlash. One of my readers pointed out to me that 12 years ago, with Mike Rinder's help, we put together a list of all the prisoners in the hole in base. And one of the people we listed in that Village Voice article was Gail Armstrong. That's Emily's mom. So I contacted Mike, and he said, "Oh yeah, Mike Rinder was in the hole with Emily Armstrong's mother." So with all this controversy raging about Emily, I just thought it was really interesting to get a little more understanding about her mom, that she's, a Sea Org person. She had been working with David Miscavige at It Base, writing speeches when she got thrown in the hole. And then what I thought was even more crucial, as far as, Linkin Park having to face some issues, is that when Mike Rinder, he was in the hole like 2006, 2007, in that era, and he escaped in 2007. And then, Going Clear came out in 2015. And then Miscavige just created all these retaliation campaigns against everybody that was in the movie. And against Mike, what they did was, I guess this was before they hit on the idea of his wife complaining about that, confrontation. Originally, how they were trying to smear Mike Rinder was having all of his former colleagues say that he was lazy and he slept on the job.
That's right. That's
which
right.
is just
that.
nuts.
Yes.
I mean, the guy was is in Scientology his whole life. He was promoted a million times, but no, he was sleeping on the job. So they had these videos made of these former colleagues, just like, yeah, this guy, he just didn't get any work done, And it's all such a silly show. One of those was Gail Armstrong.
Right.
So not only was Emily Armstrong's mother thrown in the hole, not only did she work directly with David Miscavige, but she took part in one of these fair game retaliation campaigns. And that's when you feel like, okay, Emily Armstrong did come out and apologize for showing up that one day for Danny Masterson, and she said she immediately regretted it, but she never used the word Scientology in that statement. So she's avoiding the subject. Linkin Park is avoiding the subject. I mean, the fans of Linkin Park may just be happy they've got a lineup again and they're performing again and they don't care. I don't know. It's not my problem ultimately, but I just think it's really fascinating. And Mike Rinder, supplied some interesting information about Gail Armstrong. And then the next day, Mark Headley sent me a video diving into documents that were directly related to Gail Armstrong. Some of the things some of the speeches she had written, a very fascinating briefing she had written about the Office of Special Affairs. So this is a person who was in a very important place in Scientology, who is one of the more people with some responsibility, and maybe should be asked some questions, or her daughter should be asked questions. I don't know. I've encountered different, I don't know, maybe you have too. I've encountered people that are really disgusted that Linkin Park would give this woman this position. I've run into other people that are like, well, she's a singer, she's doing well. What's that got to do with her? I don't know. I don't know where I stand on it myself. I just find it fascinating to see who she is and who her parents are.
Absolutely. I think that there is certainly room for some moral outrage. I mean, we can assume certain things just because of the fact that she's a Scientologist. The anti-psych view, for example, that's a safe assumption to make. The fact that she is LGBT in Scientology is a very interesting thing. I commented today that that doesn't mean she doesn't have internalized homophobia. I mean, people are complicated. And the LGBT stance from Scientology is crystal clear. This isn't opinion. It's in Hubbard's writings. It's not a controversial thing that Scientology is homophobic. It's right in their materials.
Right.
And also to the point with Gail, her mother, do you happen to know, because I haven't heard or seen anything about their relationship, Gail and her?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the things about a Sea Org parent is that they're not around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and she was in the hole for who knows how many years. So, I don't, the thing about the children of Sea Org parents, they can go years without seeing their parents. So, I don't know what their relationship is like myself.
Yeah.
There may be some people out there who have a better understanding of that. I've talked to some journalists that are working on some deeper dives into her. So, we may hear some interesting things coming out pretty soon.
Cool, because that would help clarify a lot. Her being a second gen Scientologist, well, how second gen? How exposed? How much is this? We still have a lot of question marks, and I think that's one of the reasons why it is a little hard to, okay, where am I supposed to come down on this? Right? It's kind of like it's okay. This one is a little bit more nuanced. But one thing I did want to point out is, this really shows the fact that Gail was in the hole, her mother is in the hole, side by side with Mike Rinder, speechwriter for Miscavige, then makes one of those hostage videos, one of those Korean videos, right?
Right.
This tells you a lot about where this poor lady's head's at. And I'll say poor lady because, like Mike and the other prisoners in the hole, these are victims of abuse. Miscavige, no question about it, right? This guy is an abuser. And she's there, but her mindset is one of a fanatic. And we've got to always kind of temper our sympathies with that too. That's what makes it so damn complicated. So we don't really know what the deal is right now today with Gail, but we know that all the indications and red flags are full-blown, hardcore, upper-level Scientologist exposed to the most awful of the awful. So how much does Emily know about that? How much should she know about that? What should the relationship be? We got a lot to sort out with
good
this
questions.
still.
Yeah, maybe we'll learn more.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I was thinking this might be sort of a story that might, be dying off, but the more I think about it, I'm sitting here talking myself right out of that right now,
Yeah.
There's a lot to look at here, and it could still be actually fairly exposing of Scientology if these dots start connecting.
Right.
Okay, there were some other stories, a couple of these kind of really fun. One of them being this OT3 success story that you posted, and the fact that Alex, I think, had something to say about this particular person. What was this one about?
Well, we see testimonials all the time. You see testimonials all the time. It's just something you do in Scientology is you have to write what's called a success story after anything that you do. They keep it on file. And then we see how they use it against people when they leave and sue. They'll say, "Hey, look, you said great things about us. So what's the deal?" Right? So it's definitely there's definitely a reason why Scientology wants you to write a success story. This one was particularly interesting because it was written by Louisa Calcioli, whose maiden name was Louisa Hodkin, and that's a name for old, longtime Scientology watchers certainly will remember, because back in about 10 years ago, there had been a years-long fight in England over religious weddings, and it's different over there than it is in the United States. There is no such thing as like an official government sanctioned religious wedding in the United States, but there is in England. You can get a officially recognized religious wedding in the Anglican Church, other churches in England. And Scientology wanted that. And they had been fighting for years, and they had been fighting against a decision that said that Scientology orgs are not places of worship, because they aren't. That's not what goes on in them. It's not worship. That's not the right word. But they fought and fought, and it was particularly led by Louisa's father, Peter Hodkin, who's basically Scientology's most well-known attorney in the United Kingdom. So Peter Hodkin fought and fought and finally got a Supreme Court decision in England that said, yes, okay, Scientology can have official religious weddings. And so the very first one they had was Peter's daughter, Louisa Hodkin, who married Alessandro Calcioli, who is the nephew of Neil Gaiman. The Gaiman family, of course, is legendary for Scientology in the United Kingdom. David Gaiman, Ali's grandfather, was an unindicted co-conspirator in Snow White. His mother, Lizzie Calcioli, is a rabid a Scientologist who will go on TV and talk it up. His grandmother, Sheila Gaiman, is still donating millions of dollars to the projects there. Neil's out, but he's it's Ali, he's Ali's most famous uncle. So anyway, so we were very interested back in 2014 when Alessandro Calcioli married Louisa Hodkin. It was a big deal then. So now, and one of the consequences of that, this is what Alex reminded us of, is they got interviewed on the BBC. And you can still see that video, and it's so painful. It's so painful because the journalists don't know what they're talking about. They're asking the stupidest questions. They don't know how to ask these questions properly. And they try to ask about Xenu and they kind of screw it up. But the Louisa and Ali are like, "Huh, what are you talking about? There's nothing like that." Which is what you have to do, right? You're not supposed to acknowledge the Xenu story publicly, and we have to also remember that if you're not OT3, you haven't been told the Xenu story, so you probably are telling the truth when you say, "I've been in Scientology. I haven't seen that." No, they haven't. Well, 10 years later, Louisa Calcioli writes a testimonial success story because now she has finally gone through OT3. And now she has finally learned the Xenu story herself. And it's amazing because, especially those of us who are outsiders, not those of you that are former Scientologists, but we look at OT3 and it's just insane. Up to that point, Scientologists had been asking their own memories about their galactic history going back billions of years. This is the first time in their career that they open up this piece of writing that L. Ron Hubbard, and he's telling them the history of the galaxy. 75 million years ago, there was this galactic warlord named Xenu who had an overpopulation problem with his 76 planet federation. And so he tricked all these people into coming in for tax audits and froze them in glycol mixtures, put them on spaceships that resembled DC-9s and flew them to planet Tigiak, which today we call Earth, packed them around volcanoes, blew them up with H-bombs. They became the body thetans that infest this planet. And 75 million years ago, there were no human beings on Earth, right? Because Hubbard nominally recognizes evolution. So 75 million years ago, there are no humans evolved yet. So those body thetans inhabited things like clams until people evolved. And then we got those body thetans from that genocide from 75 million years ago. Wonderful stuff, hilarious stuff, crazy stuff. And now Louisa Hodkin has been let in on the secret. And what's her reaction? This is my favorite OT level ever.
Yeah.
this answers all my questions. And you're just like, really?
I gotta say, man, I mean, it's the cult mindset is a horrible thing, right? Because upside down, up is down, black is white. And it doesn't, and words stop meaning things. It's all just about emotions, right? It really, really is. And I'm sure she's actually probably even completely forgotten about that interview 10 years ago where she was like, Xenu, ha, ha, ha. But I have to say that it is, you just have to give up the idea that there's rationality here.
Yeah.
It's not about that. And people, when they are driven by the powerful emotions that drive cult members, the thinking has stopped. It's open up the gas tank, feed me the information, and I will regurgitate it to you. And that's just about how far it goes. And this is a real sort of live example of that. So worth.
Yeah, and what we see in these, I remember a few years ago, I had a wonderful series of videos from a woman that was going through the grades. And after each completion, she'd go out in the park with her phone and just record herself like, this is, I just completed grade 1. This is the most incredible thing in my whole world has changed. My life has changed. I can't believe what perspective I have now. Okay, 4 months later, I've just been through grade 2. It's the greatest thing ever. I can't believe how my whole life has changed. And you're just like, really? I mean, and never saying anything concrete about what's actually changed. It's just that these completing these levels, which are grueling, right? Because you have to review all this material and reread all these books and check off all these check sheets. There's a feeling of euphoria when you're done. And so they want you at that moment to write it all down. I feel great. Everything's great. My life is great. But what changed? They can't really explain it. And it's just, and there's no difference whether you're finishing grade 1 or clear or OT3. They all say the same thing. It's all like, I finally know myself.
That's right.
And
That's right.
it,
And the really sad thing is, if you actually do your diligence and you actually investigate and watch these people's lives over time in these groups, all they're regurgitating, I said regurgitating because they're literally saying back what they were told to expect.
right.
And that's the awe, the euphoria moment. There's no thinking there,
Yeah.
It's all just emotional. And anyway, there we go. Now, talk about gut wrenching, though. Now, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, there was a disconnection story published this week from Sunny Pereira. Do you want to detail this one?
Yeah, so Sunny, she's blogging on her own now, has her own Substack, but she saved me a wonderful story for the bunker. She's been writing for years for us about how her mother just basically didn't, just was more interested in Scientology than raising kids. And so Sunny and her brother were basically abandoned by their, to the church, and they were raised by the church. Really gut-wrenching stuff. And she hasn't heard from her mother in many, many years. And apparently, fairly recently, her brother started hearing from someone saying they were speaking on behalf of their mother and wanted to speak to him about something. And of course, you can imagine the emotions that go through you after it's been years since you heard from her mother. Maybe she's in trouble. Maybe she's not well. Why would she be reaching out now? They're just freaking out. And then the person, like, it takes days to get a response from that person, and then more days to get another response. It's just torturous. And finally, it turns out that their mother had come into some money, apparently when her father had died. And then she just spent it all on Scientology stuff, including a set of books she wanted to give her son, with this gut-wrenching explanation that, okay, now I understand why your childhoods were so bad, was that the books we were relying on then had typos in them, and now those books have been corrected, and I wanted to get you a set of them. And that's and all this is going through a third person, right? And so it's just, maybe it would have been better if she just left them alone. I mean, it's just, that's why I wrote the headline I did. It's like it's this wound they keep pouring salt into year after year. Just heartless.
That's the word. It's heartless. And it was so demonstrative of how cults like Scientology, it's like they take an eraser to your heart or something. You talk about all these like emotions, but what isn't part of that emotional package is caring about other people who aren't in Scientology, who aren't in your cult.
Right.
And even if it's your kids, I even, okay, as much as I've heard over all the years of all the bullshit, right? That reading that article was really, it just broke my heart, because I know those people, and I knew the mom in the Sea Org. She worked in PAC, had no idea she even had kids. That's how not part of that life that was the whole time I knew her. And to have her reach out to give them books. I mean, wow. Talk about how it's just an example. This is the highlight for me, is how does it look when we talk about how cults dehumanize you? This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Horrible stuff. This is what Scientology does to your brain. Okay. Now, speaking of what Scientology does to brains, the final two here, there were two articles on this week. I think this is an important developing thing. This was Whitney Mills' lawsuit, David Minkoff, doctor. I put that in great big quotes. What was the story this week?
Well, we've been waiting for this. We've been expecting this. Whitney Mills was this 40-year-old OT8 Scientologist who ended her life 2 years ago. And her mother is now suing the Church of Scientology, saying that when Whitney needed mental health care, Scientology cut her off from that, gave her the worst possible advice, told her to end, do the end of life assist. In other words, get rid of this lifetime and start up a new one. And she did that. She ended this life. But also that she had been treated by this Scientology doctor, David Minkoff, who, of course, is quite notorious. He's Rebecca Minkoff's father, Rebecca Minkoff, the famous handbag designer. David Minkoff already lost his license for a year, about 10 years ago or something, because he had prescribed sedatives for Lisa McPherson without even examining her. And then she had died on the way from the Fort Harrison Hotel. They were trying to take her to him. And he was just completely negligent. He's lucky he got his license back after that. We did keep an eye on him in the intervening years. We had stories about the Quack clinic he runs with just ridiculous things he tells people. And now the stuff that's coming out about him in this case is just incredible. So when the mother, Layla Mills, sued Scientology, she couldn't sue Minkoff right away because there's this 90-day mandatory waiting period after you notify a doctor that you're going to sue him for malpractice. You have to give him 3 months for whatever reason. That period finally ended, and this week we finally got to see the additional allegations and charges. They've made David Minkoff a defendant in the lawsuit, as well as his clinic in Clearwater. There's much more detail in the lawsuit now about what he did, and it's just absolutely incredible. Here's this woman coming to this doctor begging for help. She's clearly got serious mental health problems, and he's diagnosing her with stuff like parasites and having her take ivermectin. And then when she's like in total crisis mode and begging for help, he tells her to use TR40 and a tone 40 and TR0 and that Eye of the Tiger, use your Scientology powers. Incredible, so incriminating, these text messages. So that came out, and the first day I just published in whole the specific allegations against him in the new version of the lawsuit. And then the second day, I took out, they had actually attached expert opinions from an actual medical doctor who had gone through the records. And what I thought was important in that, especially, was that he was saying when this woman came to him with these specific problems, it doesn't matter that he was a Scientologist. It doesn't matter what he thinks of psychiatry because of he's a Scientologist. He has a duty to refer her to legitimate mental health care because since he didn't, she ended up taking her life. So really super strong language and interesting timing too, because this new lawsuit was entered into court this past week, and Rebecca Minkoff showing up in the Real Housewives of New York. Those first episodes of this new season drop in a week. So we'll see if the press makes some connections, because I have a feeling the people covering the Rebecca Minkoff thing will ask the same silly questions when they should be asking very specific questions about Rebecca, her involvement in Scientology, her monetary support of Scientology, and her father, the Quack doctor, who's now been implicated in 2 Scientologist deaths.
Big time. Big time. The only thing I am upset about with this is that it's a civil lawsuit and not a criminal prosecution.
Right.
Because when you read those text messages, you're going to agree with me about that. If you haven't seen this story yet, read it. It is fascinating and disturbing that somebody could have the nerve to call themselves a doctor doing what this man does. Malpractice is a very kind word. I'm just saying, I have very strong emotions about this one, obviously. So, okay. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with this lawsuit. What is next now? Now that he's been named,
Right.
Next steps are?
So Scientology, so she initially sued 6 Scientology entities. Scientology, Church of Scientology International, Flag Service Organization, etc.
Yep.
And they were supposed to answer the lawsuit by July 26th. They came into court at that point, filed a motion asking for a delay because they said, listen, we know she's going to add this doctor and these new allegations. We really need to see those new allegations before we can answer. So now she has added Minkoff. So now Scientology and Minkoff have to answer the lawsuit. And that'll be interesting because, Scientology has its own attorneys in this case. Minkoff is going to have his attorney. And similar to what we saw in Masterson, I went into the Masterson case wondering how much is Scientology going to be involved in this case. It turns out Scientology was very involved in Danny Masterson's case, probably to Danny Masterson's detriment. So I'm going to be looking for the same thing here as far as the Minkoffs are $5 million, platinum meritorious donors. I'm not sure that Scientology is just going to throw them under the bus on this. So it'll be interesting to see how those two sets of attorneys answer this. And the other thing was that Scientology had asked for a delay because they claimed that if they could just spend some time with Layla Mills' attorney, they'd be able to talk her out of the lawsuit. Well, apparently that's not true because this new version of the lawsuit is really harsh.
Yeah. Whatever conversation they had, they weren't tone 40 enough. Let's put it that way. Now, the other difference on this lawsuit, and I think it's significant enough to mention, is that David Miscavige is not named on this one, right? Personally?
Right. RTC and David Miscavige were not named in this lawsuit. And I think as a result, the attorneys don't have the screechy rhetoric that we see in the lawsuits, like, for example, with Leah Remini, where they act so crazy because they're writing from Miscavige. I have a feeling, Miscavige doesn't care about this lawsuit that much, so they're not going to have to put on too much of an act for him.
Yep.
And they're just so, I don't know. It's just such an awful set of facts. I think there's going to be a big pressure on Scientology just to make this go away with a check. So we'll see. But at the initial motion that the Scientology attorneys have filed is deferential. And you never see attorneys for Scientology being deferential in lawsuits like the Leah Remini case or the Danny Masterson civil case. So I think the main reason is because David Miscavige was not named in this one.
Me too. Exactly. So I think we're going to see more. Well, it's going to be interesting what we're going to see. And I'm curious if it does move forward. Here's what I'm watching or hoping for is, like with Masterson, hopefully these guys are skilled enough if it actually gets into trial where they can steer the Scientology stuff into it. Because if there were cover-ups or other Lisa McPherson type stuff going on, and we're pretty sure there was, that is going to be directly connected not only to Minkoff, but to the church as a named defendant, right? So we could see an awful lot of Scientology brought into this one.
There's no question in this. I mean, there are also text messages with these Scientology handlers telling her this terrible advice. Now, Scientology, we can already tell they're going to say they weren't working for us; they were working on their own. But I think then it'll be up to Layla Mills and her attorney to prove the opposite, and I think they have good evidence on their side. So, that'll be interesting to see. That's why how they answer is going to be really interesting on both cases, and it should be pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. The other thing they won't be able to pull, with Minkoff at least, is the religion card. He wasn't giving her religious advice. He was giving her medical advice. And that's not going to fall under First Amendment protection. Oh, no, Your Honor. He was just a Scientologist telling his fellow No, not this time, guys. So, yeah, we'll see how this ends up sorting out. So those were the stories we wanted to cover through this last week. Tony, any previews of things coming up?
Yeah, there's a couple of really good things coming this week. I think it's going to be a big week. I can't say anything. I mean, maybe it'll be delayed to the following week, but some big developments soon, I think.
Cool. All right, looking forward. Okay, folks, now on the screen right in front of you there, under Tony's happy mug, you see his address for his Substack. So get on there, get subscribed, get your daily notifications, and then come around and check with us on Mondays for the weekly wrap up. All right. So thanks for coming around. I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.